Alright, welcome to ECO 2013 Macroeconomics. In this video tutorial, we are looking at question 3 from homework 7, and this is unemployment and inflation. This is one of my most favorite chapters. So, in this question, we are given the information on a country. 8 million adults, 5 million are employed, 500,000 are unemployed, and then the rest are not in the labor force. So we have to calculate for part A, what's the unemployment rate? For part B, what share of the population is in the labor force? And then for part Charlie, we have to create a pie chart that divides the population into those three groups: unemployed, employed, not in the labor force. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to copy my data into Microsoft Excel. That is, I'm going to copy this first sentence into Microsoft Excel, so that way I don't have to flip back as I go over the data. I'm going to input it into table form. So what I want to do is I want to take my total data that's in the sentence and start putting it line item by line item. So population is 8 million. The employed is 5 million, and then unemployed is 500,000. All right, and I'm going to put commas on here. Okay, so that's how many people we have in the labor force, which is going to be basically population minus unemployed plus employed. So let's go ahead and calculate that out. So labor force is going to be equal to the sum, I'll just say employed plus unemployed, and then not in the labor force is going to be equal to, there's two ways to do this, and in fact, let me show you the two ways to do this. Not in the labor force, method 1, and then not in the labor force, method 2. Alright, so method 1 is going to be just taking the total population, which is, this is adults, and subtracting off the amount that is in the labor force. That gives us 250. The other method is to just take the total population and subtract off the employed plus the unemployed. And this is literally the same formula that we just did. Well, almost literally, not quite. So here we just combined E7. We did E7 is this labor force calculation, which is implicitly the employed plus unemployed. So basically it's going to be, for this one, we'll say that this is equal to not in the labor force is equal to population minus employed plus unemployed. And then for the formula above, we have that not in the labor force is equal to the population minus labor force. So they're essentially the same formula because our labor force is employed plus unemployed. However, you're not always given, for example, unemployed plus and employed data. So sometimes you may have to use labor force. So now that we have part A, now we have our data in tabular form, we have to calculate part A. So what is the unemployment rate? And then we have to calculate part B, what share of population is in the total, is in the labor force. So the unemployment rate this is going to be equal to the amount that's unemployed divided by the labor force, which is the amount of employed plus unemployed. And then we'll convert this into percent form and add 2 decimals. All right. And now we have to calculate our share of population in the labor force. So this is called the labor force participation rate. And this is going to be equal to the labor force divided by the total population, which is going to be put into percent form, 69%, 68.75%. So you'll notice that when we do labor participation, it's just labor force over population, but other than labor force participation, we don't actually use the population in terms of any other formula. All right, so now that that's done, we have to go ahead and do part C, which is create a pie chart that divides the adult population into those 3 groups, which is employed, unemployed, and not in the labor force. So to do that, I'm going to create another table using my data over here, but I'm only going to include the data that I want to include on the table. So it's going to be called attribute group and then people. So the group is going to be employed, unemployed, and not in the labor force. And altogether, this is going to equal the population. So employed plus unemployed plus not in the labor force equals the population. And what I'm doing is I'm just referencing the formulas, or I'm referencing the data that I have. So if I go back and I change the original data up here, it'll change the results of all my calculations. All right, and now I can take this, I can select it, I go to Insert, and then Pie Chart, and just click on one of the pie charts, and now I have my data. So I want to go ahead and clean this up a little bit. It looks relatively good. What I want to do is change the title. So country X employment situation. Or actually, I will say hypothetical countries. And then I want to right click my pie slices and go to add data labels. So this looks good. And I want to right click my data series labels, go to format data labels, and then this is where I'm going to adjust where they appear. So I'm going to put outside end on the data labels, and then I'm going to include percentage. So we have the raw number at the top and then the percentage underneath. And under my separator, I'm going to put new line. So my raw data will always appear on the top, my percentage will always appear on the bottom. And altogether, this should equal 8 million. So we have 5 million plus 500,000, which is 6 million, plus 5.5 million, plus 2.5 million, which is 8 million. So we're good to go there. All right. So that's it. That's all we had to do for this question. Pie chart looks good. We'll go ahead, we'll rename our sheet question 3, and then save it to our desktop or wherever we want to save it. And that's it. Good job.